what I'd like to do, just for sort of 5 or 6 minutes, is talk a little bit about an initiative that we are trying to develop to address actually both a local problem and a social problem in terms of our online strategy. We talked quite a lot on the social side already today, I think, and there's been some great debate around Facebook, Twitter, and various other social applications. I just wanted to start off by talking a little bit about local and what I mean by local, because I think actually the term has been used quite differently by different speakers today. What I don't mean by local is a location-based service. And I think it's quite easy to conflate those two terms. And it's not wrong to do that, by the way, and there are local things that are just location-based. But what we mean by local is something that is rooted in the local community that you live in and very often work in. And I also kind of draw a distinction here between the likes of us, many of whom will live in large conurbations such as London, Manchester, etc., and actually the vast majority of the population in the UK who don't. And for those people who are living in smaller communities, there is a particular issue that we want to try and solve. And one of the reasons that we want to try and solve it is because actually when you look at those people's spend patterns and the way in which they live their lives, that life is very, very local indeed. So for example, about 70 to 75% of all the personal disposable income of somebody that lives in, say, a 30,000 town is spent within that 30,000 town, with local merchants, local retailers, on local entertainment, whatever it be. But actually, and it's a kind of cheesy phrase, but for people that live in those smaller communities, life is local. And life is not, you know, a place without borders and a place without kind of even regional barriers in many cases. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve? Well, the problem that we're trying to solve is actually how you enable those communities to have a voice online, and not only to connect to each other, but to connect around issues that are important to those communities, and ultimately allow those communities to have a single hub where they exist, they communicate, and obviously integrate with other social networks, but actually a community which is dedicated to that catchment, to that town in their own right. So why is this interesting? Well, the first reason it's interesting, and I can kind of speak from an A&D perspective here, which is DMGT's digital venturing arm that I'm a part of, is that when we look at other online media verticals, what we see is that probably about 20%, and maybe even 25% of all advertising spend is already online. Actually, when you look at local spend, you look at the SME spend, only about 6 to 7% of that spend is yet online. And actually, there are very few reasons for that to be a structural condition of those markets, as opposed to actually nobody trying to go out and trying to drive those local SMEs online and drive that 7% to that 20%. And for us, that's why this is a very interesting market. So what are we doing? The graphic kind of looks a little bit blurry, so forgive me. But local people, as I say, are local issue-based communities where local people can go online and talk about, you know, whether it's the fact that there's a new Tesco that's opening in the high street, whether it's the fact that there's band nights in the local pub, whether they want to post their local photos of the local carnival, whatever it be, they're able to go online to dedicated sites for their communities and actually create the content that populates that community. And of course, what that means is that we're able to deliver unbelievably targeted advertising products for the local SMEs in that market. So in the sites that we've launched to date, actually just over 80% of all the users of those sites are coming from the local communities of which they're a part. So where are we with this? Well, we've launched about 40 sites across the UK so far. A couple of months ago. We are so far seeing pretty much exponential growth of those sites, and the ones that we launched end of June, beginning of July, are now hitting sort of around about 40% of the online households in their catchment, which we're quite excited about. And so why is this interesting then? Well, first of all, there is a huge consumer appetite for local and, if you like, hyper-local propositions. And just a couple of stats here, which you may or may not be able to read. So what are people interested in? Actually, they're less interested in their regions and their counties and those kind of if you like, macro geographic regions, and at the same point, they're less interested in the micro, which is their street, or, you know, their couple of houses. What they're really interested is in their villages, their towns, their suburbs. Those are the places where they have the greatest community connection. And how big are those places? Well, actually, typically, they're only up to about 20,000 people. And so if you're providing a community, actually you need to provide a community that addresses the area that people see themselves as being community-oriented into. And actually, at the moment, this is a really underserved market by other media, both whether it's traditional media, whether it's regional press, or whether that's actually, you know, local independent blogs or websites. Very few of these towns actually have a compelling local proposition which allows the community to get together in a single space. And interestingly, you know, the chart at the bottom suggests that up to about 70% of towns don't have anything that services this need at the moment. And from an advertising perspective, I'll just sort of bombard you with a couple of stats. This really is, as somebody said earlier, you know, this really is a market where there is gold in their hills. There's 2.6 million small business advertisers in the UK, each spending on average about £2,000, giving a total market opportunity of about £5 billion in the UK alone. However, as I say, only 7% of that money is yet being spent online. To the best of my knowledge, that's pretty much the lowest of any vertical that has historically been a large offline vertical in terms of its transference to online. But actually, one of the main barriers at the moment to more of that spend going online is that local advertisers don't really like what they're being offered. They don't like traditional directory products. They see them as being quite regional. They see them as being extremely expensive. And they see them as having huge, very, very high wastage rates, i.e. a lot of the people that actually are generating leads for the business are well outside their catchment area and don't actually convert into customers. And also, these guys are simple souls, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but they are not yet at a stage where they are happy or comfortable doing self-service advertising with Google. They don't trust it, they don't really understand it, and actually there needs to be, and it is difficult, and it potentially may be unprofitable in the short term, but these guys need a more consultative sell to actually bring them online, because in many cases, in fact, in the vast majority of cases, they're not online. In fact, about 80% currently don't do any advertising activity online. And what we want to do at Local People is address this opportunity. Online product, low cost to advertisers, response focused, and extremely local and therefore low wastage. I thought just to finish off, two final slides which kind of lay out a little bit more about what this market looks like and what the monetization potential is. We did a really deep dive in a couple of towns across the UK to understand actually how advertising dollars flowed around that town. And a couple of really interesting findings, I think. That if you look at the total media spend in that town, actually, once you strip out classified advertisers like estate agents, etc., you strip out big national advertisers that are doing a bit locally, and you strip out non-local spend, actually only 15% of all the money at the moment in local towns that's advertising money is local SMEs spending money locally. And of that, the vast majority still sits with yellow pages and directory products and regional press. And actually, in this instance, only 6% is sitting online at the moment.